Okay, let's unpack this. Think about the idea of true wealth today. It feels like the flash and the fuss are kind of outright.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. Something much quieter is in, more subtle.
Exactly. We're
Yeah.
talking about quiet elegance, that understated style.
hmm
It whispers, it doesn't shout.
And right there, I mean, smack bang in the middle of that whole shift, maybe even the person who defined it for decades.
Is Ralph Lauren.
Absolutely. It's fascinating because when you look at the numbers and we have digging into the articles and research, his empire is just immense.
Huge.
Forbes had his net worth around, what, $11.9 billion back in May 2025. Staggering number.
But it's not just the number, is it? That's impressive, sure. But the real story, the thing we want to dig into
Oh.
is how. How did he build that much value championing an aesthetic that, well, it avoids showing off?
Exactly. Because he's so much more than just a designer in the usual sense.
Right, he's a storyteller,
Hey.
an architect of aspiration, maybe.
Yeah, I like that. Someone who took this seemingly simple idea, timeless style, and just transformed it. Built a global legacy, a multi-billion-dollar business, all in the power of being subtle, restrained.
He really pioneered this whole approach, didn't he? Long before quiet luxury was even a term people
Oh,
used.
decades before. While other brands were chasing the biggest logo, the loudest statement piece,
Trying to grab attention with flashy designs.
Lauren was doing the opposite, consistently. Perfecting understatement, building status based on, like, intrinsic quality, a feeling of belonging, not just visibility.
He wasn't just selling clothes off a rack. He was selling an identity, a feeling, a whole curated world almost.
Yeah, the American dream kind of packaged up, made tangible in fabric and cut and experience.
So this deep dive, it's not just fashion history, it's not just business figures, it's really an exploration into how one person, one vision, built an $11.9 billion empire by, well, changing the rules, redefining how wealth looks, how status works, how influence is built to last.
We're going to trace that whole journey from his roots, in the Bronx.
All the way to outfitting the global elite. It feels like a masterclass in vision, really, and restraint. That quiet influence.
And to really get it, you've got to start right at the beginning. Look at his aesthetic mindset, where this whole idea of quiet luxury, his version of it, actually came from.
Right, because the background is so important here. It's foundational. Ralph Lauren wasn't, born with a silver spoon.
Yeah.
Not into that world his brand came to represent.
Not at all. He was born Ralph Lifshitz, 1939, in the Bronx, New York City.
His parents were Jewish immigrants. His dad painted houses for a living.
Brothers served in the army. It was a very working class background, miles away from the aristocracy he'd later, evoke so powerfully.
And that's such a critical piece, isn't it?
Yeah.
He didn't inherit taste or status. He had to imagine it, cultivate it himself.
And his focus, even as a kid, was apparently quite different. The sources mention this while other kids were playing ball or whatever.
He was doing what?
Collecting old Hollywood movie posters, sketching these really detailed suits, studying figures like Cary Grant, Fred Astaire, but not just what they wore.
How they wore it.
Exactly, how they carried themselves, the way they moved, the presence they had.
So it wasn't just about the clothes. Even then, it was the whole package. The posture, the confidence.
That effortless kind of ease. He was fascinated by the idea of elegance, that aspiration towards a certain kind of class, a sophistication that felt, I guess, timeless, not just trendy for a moment.
And he took that fascination and turned it into, well, his first business move.
Right. 1967, he's 28 years old, launches a line of neckties.
And the name he chooses, Polo.
Instantly, just that one word. What does it make you think of?
Aristocracy, horses, tradition, old money, sort of.
Precisely. It was an immediate signal, conjuring up a whole lifestyle just with the name. Super smart.
And the ties themselves, they stood out too, didn't they?
Yeah, at a time when ties were generally pretty skinny, his were wider, bolder in their shape.
But not flashy.
No, that's the key. Despite the bold dimension, the design was classic. Meant to last, not be disposable fashion. They weren't loud with patterns or crazy colors. The statement was in the confidence, the difference.
Suggesting something more substantial, like legacy, quiet power.
That's it, a quiet self-assurance. And that became the core idea, right? That clothing should whisper status, not scream it.
That paradox became the foundation for everything else.
Totally. You look at the core pieces that define the brand. The polo shirt, the blazer, the cable knit sweater. What's missing?
Big logos,
Yeah.
flashy hardware, glitter.
Right. The value is supposed to be inherent in the quality of the fabric, the cut, that feeling of heritage they give off.
Which loops back to why we can say he defined quiet luxury. He wasn't reacting to a trend decades later.
No way. This commitment to understatement, quality over flash, it was there from day one, long before TikTok discovered it or, people started analyzing Succession's wardrobe.
He had the concept way before the culture had the label for it.
And a really pivotal moment, one that kind of cemented this whole aesthetic in the public eye, was 1974.
The Great Gatsby.
Exactly. He gets asked to design the wardrobe for the movie, dressing Robert Redford as Gatsby, plus the whole cast.
And that movie just became iconic, a visual dictionary for that sort of effortless 1920s American elite style.
It really did. And Ralph Lauren, as one source put it, became its silent architect.
Silent architect, I like that. Because the clothes weren't just costumes, were they?
No, they were part of the story. They told you so much about the characters, their social standing, their dreams, without anyone having to say a word. The clothes themselves had character. They spoke of privilege, a certain world, just by how they looked and felt.
So by the late 70s, he's way past just selling shirts and ties.
Oh yeah, he's selling a whole world, a carefully built myth, a feeling.
He captured that look, that feel of old money, inherited ease.
And somehow made it accessible aspirationally to people who weren't born into it. But, and this is so crucial for the brand's success.
He never let it look tacky.
Never. Never flashy, never overtly new money. Always restrained.
His real genius seems to be in that choice, choosing less when the whole world often screams for more.
More logos, more color, more noise, yeah. And by choosing restraint, subtlety, timelessness, he paradoxically built something incredibly powerful and valuable.
He wasn't the loudest brand out there.
But his vision let him become, metaphorically speaking, the richest man in the room.
And it's incredible how that aesthetic vision, that commitment to less is more, wasn't just an artistic thing. It connects directly to a really distinct financial strategy.
Oh, absolutely. It's a brilliant business model that flows right out of the design philosophy. He never aimed to be the biggest player in terms of sheer volume.
Not try to sell it to everyone.
No, he wasn't chasing every demographic with tons of different products. That just wasn't the goal. He made a very conscious, strategic choice. Position the brand in a space where, okay, maybe fewer people buy.
But each purchase means something huge to the buyer.
Exactly. It carries enormous weight. It's not about moving millions of cheap units. It's about each item being a signal, a story about the person buying it, reinforcing an identity or an aspiration.
His empire wasn't built on sales and discounts.
No, it was built on desire, cultivating that wanting. That's a totally different engine for value and arguably much more sustainable long term.
And he understood something deep about why people buy luxury, didn't he? Especially early on.
He really did. He got that when someone buys, say, a $2,500 coat, they're not just buying warmth.
Function isn't the main point.
Not at all. They're buying the signal it sends. To others, yes, but maybe even more importantly to themselves. It's about affirming who you are, or maybe who you want to be.
It's less about utility, more about identity, belonging.
Absolutely. Identity affirmation. Belonging to a certain group, a standard of taste. And he built this massive financial machine, a public company worth billions based on that fundamental insight. Identity drives purchases.
Let's just touch on the scale again based on the sources. That $11.9 billion personal net worth estimate for May 2025.
And the company itself, Ralph Lauren Corporation, ticker RL, pulling in nearly $7 billion a year in revenue.
And profitably, too. That's key. Around $705 million in net income mentioned.
And what's really telling is that their operating margins actually went up, even with inflation, economic uncertainty recently.
Which points straight to
Pricing power. Big time. When your brand means timeless quality, heritage, a desirable identity, and it's not just tied to the latest fad, you have way more control over your pricing.
Makes sense. It's a different game than fast fashion.
Totally different. Fast fashion is all about rapid cycles, huge volumes, chasing micro trends. They often struggle with waste, changing tastes, squeezed margins.
Whereas Ralph Lauren focuses on the value per piece.
Right. Investing in better materials, classic cuts that don't date, limited editions that boost desirability. The brand aims to transcend seasons.
It doesn't need a total makeover every few months because it is the enduring look.
And that makes the strategy really resilient, especially when the economy gets shaky. Mid-range consumers might cut back, But the very wealthy, or those with serious disposable income.
They don't necessarily stop buying luxury.
No, but they often buy smarter. They look for pieces that feel like long-term investments in their style, their identity. Things that signal taste and quality, not just temporary flash.
And Ralph Lauren is perfectly positioned for that customer. The clothes become almost like a uniform for the discreetly powerful.
That's a good way to put it. An investment in projecting a certain image that isn't about shouting wealth, but about confirming status.
And it sounds like the current leadership, under CEO Patrice Levesque, they're doubling down on this.
They are. They haven't chased mass market trends. Instead, they've focused on refining, elevating, trimming product lines that don't quite fit the high-end vision, streamlining collections.
Focusing on those elevated essentials you mentioned.
Exactly. Things like the purple label suits impeccable tailoring, the black label knits super luxurious, the double RL denim, that authentic, rugged feel.
And these lines,
Yeah.
they're not meant for everyone, are they?
No, the sources are clear on that. They're deliberately not meant for the masses. They're for the few. That exclusivity isn't an accident. It is the point.
Reinforces that insider feeling. If you know, you know.
Right. And even how they expand internationally reflects this restraint. Takes China, a huge market, right? Instead of plastering stores everywhere.
They do fewer, bigger concept stores.
Yeah, much larger, more impactful locations, designed to feel less like shops, more like experiences, like stepping into a private club or a curated home. It's about the feeling of exclusivity, status, not just shifting product.
So the financial result of this whispering strategy is pretty powerful. While others are shouting, RL is making serious money, offered more efficiently per sale, by selling less volume at a higher value.
It's like financial minimalism, maybe. Building billions not on quantity, but on quality, meaning, and a price that reflects that. It's the aesthetic vision perfectly translated into finance.
And that financial success is totally tied up with his bigger goal, right?
Yeah.
Which was never just about fashion, but about creating a whole lifestyle.
Yes. This is where it gets really interesting, beyond just the clothes. He understood, seemingly from the start, that real style isn't just what's on your back.
It's how you live.
Everything. How you walk, where you eat, how your home looks, even how it smells, all those little details.
So he started moving beyond clothes. You mentioned the 80s.
Yeah. Began what the sources call lifestyle orchestration.
Which led to Ralph Lauren Home.
Right. And this wasn't just slapping his name on some towels. The home line furniture, bedding, china, lighting it had the exact same DNA. That quiet elegance.
So the furniture wasn't super trendy or loud?
No, it was curated, timeless.
Right.
That same feeling of having been passed down. One source said it looked as if inherited from 3 generations ago. It perfectly captures it.
That's not just selling more products then, it's...
World building, definitely. He was creating the entire environment, the backdrop for the life his customers aspired to.
And you really feel that world when you go into the flagship stores like the Madison Avenue Mansion.
Oh, absolutely. They're designed to feel completely different. Not like a store at all.
More like an old money house. Or like stepping inside his head.
Yeah, both feel right. The whole atmosphere is curated. Soft lighting, that specific woody scent, the kind of jazz playing. It's all deliberate.
No pushy salespeople. No thumping music like you get in so many shops.
None of that. The environment itself communicates. It whispers. It suggests comfort, arrival. You've arrived.
And the advertising does the same thing, right? Not typical fashion shots.
No, they feel more like movie stills. Very evocative. Characters living out these fantasies, couple on horseback in Aspen, guy adjusting cufflinks in a study.
They're not yelling, buy this shirt.
Not at all. They're presenting scenes from this desirable lifestyle. And the genius is the invitation. It invites you, the viewer, to imagine yourself in that scene, to play along, as one source said, if you're willing to invest in that world.
He's not telling you what to buy. He's inviting you to become someone.
Exactly, to adopt that persona. Timeless, quality, understated confidence.
And you see that philosophy everywhere, even in how the models look.
Yeah, they rarely have big, cheesy grins. There's a quiet confidence. They don't look like they need your approval. And the brand avoids digital stunts, viral tricks.
Because true taste doesn't need to beg for clicks.
That seems to be the view. And the clothes themselves, subtle cuts, muted colors, tailored shapes, they don't scream for attention. They're designed to own the room nonetheless, as the source put it, quietly.
So it's not about the logo. It's about embodying the persona. If you choose RL, you're adopting that posture, that mindset of someone who, well, doesn't need to prove anything anymore.
It's more than branding. It's mythology. built carefully, piece by piece, experience by experience.
And that refusal to shout, to chase trends, it links directly to how his influence works, doesn't it? It feels like pure soft power.
Absolutely. He's not the loudest voice. He's the quiet man in the back, as the source described him. His influence is everywhere, but it's subtle. You might not even notice it until suddenly you do.
And unlike some designers who become huge personalities, almost bigger than the brand,
He never really did that. He built a legacy of taste and aesthetic identity that could stand alone. It's designed to outlive him, to be bigger than any one person or medium.
and that feels like pure soft power. He doesn't have to convince you the brand is elite.
No, by just being it, embodying it in every detail, he creates that feeling of, if you know, you know. That unspoken understanding among the people who get it, that creates a kind of intimacy, a loyalty that you just can't buy with mass marketing.
He didn't have to chase celebrities for buzz. They came to him.
Right. Think Redford after Gatsby, sure, but also people like Meghan Markle more recently, Olympic athletes, year after year, political figures. Why do they wear it?
Not necessarily to get noticed in a loud way.
Probably not. More likely to align themselves with something timeless, established, to belong to that world.
And his influence pops up in surprising places too, dressing the U.S. Olympic teams for over 10 years.
That's huge. It's not just uniforms. It's shaping the visual identity of American pride on a world stage, translating his aesthetic onto the nation's athletes.
And the cafes, the restaurants, the ranch,
Yeah.
extending that world beyond just stores.
Yeah. They're like outposts of his influence, examples of careful placement, strategic silence.
And how does that translate to today's world, the super noisy digital age?
Well, while everyone else is screaming for likes and shares,
His brand's online stuff feels different.
it does. The posts often feel like postcards from another world. A world where elegance matters more than clicks, where time feels slower, where, as one source beautifully put it, the only people who notice your watch are the ones who already own it.
It's signaling to the insiders, not performing for everyone.
He never really had to fight for attention in that typical way.
Yeah.
By defining his vision and sticking to it, he just attracted it. Quietly, magnetically, permanently. That's real soft power.
Because true influence doesn't need to demand attention. It just defines the standard, defines taste.
Exactly. And that long game, that commitment to quiet authority is precisely why he's perfectly positioned right now. With this huge global trend, quiet luxury becoming the new standard for so many.
Right, because for years, luxury often meant showing off, didn't it?
Yeah.
Big names, big logos, bright colors.
Conspicuous consumption was the name of the game for a long time.
But there's been a real shift, especially accelerating since maybe 2023.
Definitely. The sources point to the ultra-wealthy, the really affluent, starting to dress differently, not cheaper necessarily.
They're less obviously branded, less flashy.
Yeah, because for them, maybe true wealth doesn't need to shout anymore. It's less about proving it to others, more about knowing it yourself and signaling it subtly to those who get the cues.
So the era of quiet luxury arrived.
Hmm.
Driven by discretion, maybe fatigue with logos.
And Ralph Lauren wasn't scrambling to catch up.
He was already there.
He was already living it. While other big fashion houses were suddenly shrinking logos, going for muted colors, trying to nail that stealth wealth look, he'd been doing quality without ego, elegance without flash for half a century. He just stayed the course.
And that low logo, high quality approach became super relevant in places where showing off wealth is tricky.
Right.
Like the luxury shaming idea in China.
Second-gen billionaires maybe wanting more discretion. And yeah, the sources mention a sales surge for RL in Asia between 2023-2025, especially for those top lines, Purple Label, Double RL.
And those flagship stores in Shanghai or Seoul, reinforcing that. Sanctuaries of taste.
Exactly. Colonial Americana decor, subtle staff, prices maybe not even displayed.
Sending that message if you have to ask.
This isn't for you. It reinforces the exclusivity, that insider feeling.
And then you have the whole hashtag quiet luxury thing exploding on TikTok. Millions of views.
Yeah, all those videos comparing old money style to new money flash, terms like succession core, stealth wealth becoming common knowledge.
But while lots of people are trying to mimic that aesthetic,
Ralph Lauren embodies it. He's the original blueprint.
and you see it in the West too. Tech money, finance types, moving away from flashy streetwear.
Towards, yeah, perfect cashmere polos, understated blazers, minimal branding.
Yeah.
Not because it's cheaper, but because it's Timeless, elevated, less traceable maybe.
So he's not riding the quiet luxury wave.
He is the wave, as the source said. While others pivot constantly, he holds firm, trusting that the world always catches up to taste.
And right now, in 2025, it feels like the world really has caught up to his philosophy.
Yeah, that desire for less flash, more substance, less noise, more narrative, it feels very aligned.
So quiet luxury isn't niche anymore. It's kind of the new standard for a certain kind of sophistication. And Ralph Lauren's right at the heart of it.
So when we boil it all down, what are the big lessons here, the main takeaways from his story?
Well, the biggest thing, I think, is that he didn't just build a brand. He built a belief system, a whole philosophy about a way to live embodied in everything he did.
He really mastered restraint, didn't he? In a world that's constantly chasing validation, wanting to be louder and louder.
His brand became the silence in a noisy market. And that silence was powerful, compelling, because it was quiet.
Maybe the biggest lesson, beyond fashion or business even, is about discipline.
How so?
The discipline to resist trends, to know that saying less can mean more, to choose legacy over hype.
Prioritizing the long game over quick attention.
Yeah. And his brand really redefined what wealth looks like, shifted it from loud display to quiet quality. It's not about the label shouting at you. It's about the feel of the fabric, the perfect fit, that sense of ease, not needing to perform.
It's a great reminder that you don't need to shout to be seen or prove your status if you have that quiet confidence. The source mentioned the most powerful people are often the quietest.
They don't feel the need to announce themselves. So maybe the ultimate takeaway, whether you wear his clothes or not, is a different view of success.
Not just measured by numbers, even though his are huge.
Right. But measured by taste, by creating something timeless, by having that confidence that doesn't need constant applause.
And maybe the most provocative thought to leave people with. Maybe the richest thing you can actually own today
Is the ability to not need to prove it to anyone.
If that idea resonates with you listening, if you connect with the thought that elegance doesn't have to shout, that success can speak softly, then maybe you're already part of this quiet revolution in your own way.
Yeah, because as the sources suggest, real power doesn't need to perform constantly. Style isn't just what you wear.
It's maybe even more about what you choose not to wear. It's about leading with vision, not just volume.
And it kind of encourages all of us, maybe, to look for insight in the quieter details, to find value in subtlety, because sometimes those are the things that shape the world most profoundly.